Welcome to Inside Politics with Kevin Klein, beyond the headlines, beyond the spin. Straight facts, sharp analysis, and common sense conversation you won't hear anywhere else. Let's get started.
Hi, I'm Kevin Klein. Welcome to another edition of Inside Politics. I am joined by three of my colleagues at the Winnipeg Sun. We have columnist Royce Coop, who is also a professor of political sciences at the University of Manitoba. Columnist Jeff Currier, who has been away on an extended vacation for a couple of shows, but he is back now and has columns back in the Winnipeg Sun. And of course, we're joined by columnist Lawrence Pinsky of the King's Council. Gentlemen, thank you for joining me. We have a jam-packed show this week. There's a lot going on. And I want to start with our last show. We talked a lot about Nahanni Fontaine and what she had said about or reposted about Charlie Kirk and his assassination. We recently just ran another story in the Winnipeg Sun that had some screenshots of a conversation between her and a voter, where she was belittling this person. It was a gentleman who identified himself as a vet and a Métis, trying to get answers from her, and she was just kind of firing back, calling him little guy, telling him to take a nap. It was just horrendous. And then I saw a video that was posted by the Conservative Party in Manitoba that I thought we would watch first that would add to the conversation. So this is something, it shows you what Nahanni Fontaine does while she's in the House and what she says.
When they show you who they are, believe them. My message to Manitobans is that when somebody shows you who they are, believe them. Message to Manitobans is when the Premier and his cabinet show you who they are, believe them. Said many, many times, when people show you who they are, believe them.
It was okay. I was thrown off. It wasn't great. But because the woman, she shouldn't have been on the stage. I couldn't see me. They were on the side. And all I could see her was her...
frantic hand?
Yeah. I was like, why did they have her on the side? So I'm like, you need to react.
And at the very end there, that is a clip that Nahanni Fontaine was speaking. She didn't know that the cameras and mics were on when media were around her. And she made comments about a sign language interpreter on the stage and fluttering hands and how it was bothering her. She apologized for that. She also apologized for the Charlie Kirk post and repost. So let's talk about this. Is Wab Kinew hurting the NDP or hurting his chances as being seen as this true leader by not touching Nahanni Fontaine? Royce, I'll start with you.
Yeah, I think so. There was some question as to whether or not she would be fired from cabinet as a response, or as a response to these comments that she made. I don't think that's likely to happen. The reality is that Kinew and Fontaine have a very long history. She was supportive of him when he needed support. There were some very dark days in the leadership of Wab Kinew in which Nahanni Fontaine stood by him. You know, in politics, there's that old saying, you have to dance with the ones who brung you. And I think Kinew is stuck with Fontaine, despite that, you know, she is costing the government. Like she distracts from the agenda. This is all negative news that is popping up, but they seem to be stuck with each other.
Well, Jeff, you've covered lots of news through Manitoba, and you know that there's been politicians that have said things that they've had to retract. But in some cases, it's really damaged them in the next election, and it's damaged their careers. Do you think this is going to hurt Nahanni?
It should. It certainly should. And it should damage Wab Kinew. And one of the things we've talked about in the past, gentlemen, is the fact that Wab Kinew, up until recently, had not been putting the puck in his own net. And I think this is, you know, they're starting to score on themselves with this one by their inaction, his refusal to take any kind of action with regard to Nahanni Fontaine, who has consistently and repeatedly displayed that she is unfit to hold public office. I don't know how else you can put this. I mean, somebody who behaves like this on a consistent basis, this isn't a one-off. This is a pattern of behavior. Which shows that she is unfit to be in this position. And the Premier is refusing to address this situation other than to say, well, she's apologized. Not good enough anymore. Not good enough anymore.
Yeah, so Lawrence, what do you say to that, right? There's a lot of stuff online since we broke the story in the Winnipeg Sun of people saying just what Jeff said. The apology is not enough. She has to be removed from cabinet. And of course, then there's others saying, well, there's free speech.
Well, let me first say to Ms. Fontaine, I believe who you are. I think it's quite clear who you are. I think you've proven it over a number of years. That the accessibility minister would do what she did with the ASL interpreter is atrocious, and with an empty apology. It's not even an apology. It's not a mea culpa, and this isn't a person who does better, which is one of the keystones of a true apology. Is you take responsibility for your actions and you agree to do better. That's not what happened in this incident either. So they're not real apologies. It seems to me that the premier really needs to wear this now, because he actually has a choice. He has a choice to discipline her in some way or not. And because he's chosen not to, it's now his responsibility. I hope the people of Manitoba will keep up the pressure, because it isn't really, sure, people have free speech, but they then also have to have accountability for their free speech. It's not a free ride ticket where there's no accountability. And for Ms. Fontaine to have said what she said about the assassination of Mr. Kirk, and then I think, Kevin, your article pointed out what she said to that Métis veteran, self-identified. It's really, really atrocious. I don't understand it. I guess it goes back to what I said last time, is it reveals an arrogance, a self-centered arrogance that really has no place there. And the old expression, silence is violence, to some degree, now the premier is saying he adopts that stance toward a Métis constituent. He adopts that stance toward the deaf community. And I think it's far less than what Manitobans really deserve in a minister of accessibility yet and families.
Yeah.
A minister of families, accessibility, gender. I mean, the list goes on, right? And I think the number of people that are calling for Wab Kinew to still do something is telling. There are a number of petitions circulating. We're getting my inbox is being filled daily with notes from people saying, help us, promote this petition to have Nahanni Fontaine not only removed from cabinet, but removed from the NDP caucus. And there were a lot of people point to Mark Wassilou, who was let go and removed from the NDP caucus for far, far less than that. I think it was because his partner in a legal firm was representing Peter Nygard, but they took the opportunity to kick him out of caucus for that, but not Nahanni Fontaine. Wab Kinew is also making a little bit of news. He put out a video now. He's saying, and I'll see if I have it here, that the Manitoba is going to stand up at the Supreme Court to protect religious freedoms, civil liberties, and democracy. He's beating up on the Bill 21 from Quebec. He says in there that, well, actually, let me play this clip for you.
We know that freedom of religion is so important to Manitobans, that we know that civil liberties are so important to Manitobans. And we know that most important of all is democracy. Quebec's Bill 21 would prevent people from wearing visible symbols of their religious faith in public. And what we're arguing in our intervention at the Supreme Court of Canada is to put the power back in your hands, where it belongs.
Okay, so Wab Kinew talks about what the Manitoba government's going to do to the Supreme Court, but he says in there that the Bill 21 from Quebec won't allow people to wear religious symbols in public. That is incorrect. That's not what the bill talks about, right, Royce?
Yeah, that's right. There's a much more narrow application, and the Premier of Manitoba is involving himself in this brief to the Supreme Court on the challenge to this law. Really, what we're seeing is some real attacks on the notwithstanding clause in the Constitution from two different directions. And for some reason, the Premier of Manitoba has decided that he wants to be involved in this. I don't agree with the law in Quebec. I'm a Christian. I don't like what they're doing, but I also don't feel, I'm not from Quebec. I would like to see the government of Manitoba focus on Manitoba rather than paying a bunch of lawyers to intervene in what's happening in another province.
Well, you brought up lawyers, so we'll let Lawrence talk then. How does this? How do you see this as from a legal perspective? Is he doing the right thing, or should he mind his own business?
Well, first of all, Royce, there's nothing the matter with paying lawyers. But now to the actual meat of the thing.
I'd like to have a vote on that.
It depends on what you're doing when you vote, Kevin. So let's go back for a moment and understand what this is about. This is called the English Montreal School Board versus Quebec case. And Quebec passed essentially a secularism law that said that people who are hired by the government, be that judges, firefighters, police officers, or whatever it is, can't wear any religious symbols. Not the public at large, but people who serve the public, they can't wear any religious symbols. And they did that in response to what they believed, what the government, the elected officials, like them or don't like them, but what they believe was a massive problem, a growing problem in Quebec, and really also in France, that said that certain folks were maybe diluting the culture of the country and trying to change it to be something else. And so they, instead of passing a law that targeted any specific group, they said, we're secular, nobody can wear a religious symbol who serves the public. It's an interesting approach to it. When I first read it, I thought, like Royce, this is not where I live, and I don't like this either. But on the other hand, I also, over the last couple of years, have seen the rationale come to the streets of Canada, why Quebec passed this law. So let's look at the constitutional issue just for a few seconds. The real problem here is what the federal government has said. And I'll go back for a second. This notwithstanding clause really arose due to the intervention of another Manitoba premier, Sterling Lyon at the time, who eventually became a judge, and Peter Lougheed in Alberta, and Jean Chrétien from the federal government at the time, who put together this term because otherwise there would never have been a Charter of Rights and Freedoms. So they put this in to say, in some cases, the legislature has the right to say, we're going to override a breach of legal and equality rights and fundamental freedoms, but it has a sunset of 5 years, and then it could be renewed. What the federal government is arguing to the Supreme Court, which is really upsetting if one follows this, they're saying that use of this critical constitutional feature itself is unconstitutional, or the repeated use of it. The government of Manitoba is intervening to say, and many people are intervening in this case, and many governments, what Manitoba is saying is, it's fine to use the notwithstanding clause, but the courts should be able to declare something as a breach even when a government uses the notwithstanding clause. In my view, it's a waste of money and time. And what the premier said is he wants it to be a political tool. He wants to use the court as a political cudgel. And that, with respect, is not the role of the court, and it's an abuse of the role of the court. And for whoever is dealing with this, not a government who taxes us like crazy and uses our money for no good reason, but there's somebody bringing a constitutional challenge behind it. And in my view, it's I don't want to say obscene, but it's an unfortunate waste of resources for people and for our government. If a government uses a notwithstanding clause, they're allowed to do it. It's part of the Constitution. And the real issue here is what the federal government, how they're trying to go through the back door and amend a delicate constitution in an era when the PQ in Quebec is so high in the polls and may win the next election, is calling it a separatist election. And Alberta is talking about separatism. Alberta has used the notwithstanding clause, so has Quebec. This is going to be a trigger to a major problem if the Supreme Court accepts the invitation of the federal government. I don't think they will. I think the Supreme Court, I hope to God they get it right. I think they will. I think we're lucky to have some good judges up there, a lot of good judges up there. And I hope they'll get it right. If they don't, there's going to be a huge price to pay in Canadian unity.
Oh, I think they'll accept the arguments. The government is giving the court the opportunity to empower themselves relative to the governments. How could they possibly pass that up? And of course, Lawrence is exactly right. People are saying these are small changes. They're not small changes, and they will lead to a national unity crisis. I'm 90% sure of that. In Quebec, in Alberta, you can't just unilaterally rewrite parts of the Constitution that were part of the balance that was inherent to the Constitution in 1982 and expect that nothing will happen. It will certainly lead to a national unity crisis.
I'd like to get Jeff's thoughts on this. Number one
Yeah.
is Canoe really wasting a lot of time? Because why would you tell Quebec what to do? Because we wouldn't want Quebec to tell us what to do. And your thoughts on this constitutional challenge?
Well, first of all, I think Canoe is probably using this just as a distraction. This steers him away from the fact that, from the Nahanni Fontaine story, from the fact that they're making a hash of their promise to balance the budget. This is a nice little distraction. Makes him look like a statesman on the national stage, but it distracts from the core issues that are going on here in Manitoba. On the street level in Quebec, this really comes down to things like hijabs. I mean, that's really what it's about. The question then becomes, is the hijab a religious symbol or is it a cultural symbol? And that's not at all clear, because the Quran, nowhere in the Quran does it enforce or insist that women wear hijabs. It merely says that women should dress modestly. So is the hijab, for example, a cultural symbol or a religious symbol? That's not at all clear to me. A turban, for example, on a Sikh is clearly a religious symbol. That's more clear. But some of these are far less clear. And I agree with Royce and Lawrence in that, we're treading on very dangerous ground here. First of all, by trying to limit provinces' ability to use the notwithstanding clause. I think that's dangerous ground. That clause was inserted into the Charter of Rights and Freedoms for a very good reason. Now, whether or not you think Quebec is being wise in using it in this case, I think that's open to debate, but that's for Quebecers to decide.
Yeah, I want to come back to something. It's not just a hijab, and Jeff, far be it from us to get involved with whatever is or isn't a religious symbol in anyone else's faith. Mm-hmm. But there's burqas, there's other issues that I think religious scholars, at least the ones I've read, have said that it is a cultural issue for particular countries, not a religious requirement. But whether it is or isn't, this really, the idea that our province, our premier, is going to use the court as a political tool. And he said that. He wants to be able to go to an election and say some particular law, look, the court has said that really that was a breach of legal rights or equality rights or fundamental freedoms. But really that's irrelevant, because it's like saying, I'm only going to focus on the left hand, even though there's also a right hand. The fact is, it's all part of the Constitution. The notwithstanding clause was critical in allowing this to pass in the first place. And it's really a question of an abuse, really, of the courts that the premier is engaging in. And I think it's a mistake. Now, he's not the only one doing that. Other people or other interveners are making the same argument. But the real crisis lies with what the federal government is trying to do. Mr. Carney is trying to really change the Constitution in a super dangerous way in terms of Canadian unity, and therein lies the problem. And I do agree also with Jeff, by the way, this is a distraction.
I want to get Royce's thought on this. I've been a firm believer that should be a very strong line between church and state. And this seems to be blurring that line or really giving the government the control.
Yeah, and people, Francophone Quebecers, supporters of the bill in Quebec would dispute that. I mean, there's a long tradition in Quebec of Francophone Quebecers using the provincial government in order to protect the French language, to protect French culture within the context of English-speaking North America and the cultural behemoth south of us. And there's a long history of kind of stepping on individual rights in order to do so. We all remember the sign laws in Quebec and similar things. I think that to the question of our government's acting inappropriately, there is a small group of people in this country, kind of law professors, intelligentsia. They don't like the notwithstanding clause. They want to get rid of it. But nobody in the Liberal Party, including Mark Carney, breathed a word about the notwithstanding clause in this election campaign. What we were supposed to be getting was a sensible, middle of the road economic manager with all the right credentials who was going to steer us through this difficult situation. Instead, we're getting this, like, where did this come from? Where is this stuff coming from? I don't get it, and I think that most Canadians kind of feel like this is not what we were asking for. This is not what we thought we were getting from the last election campaign.
Well, let's talk about Carney now. You've brought that up. I mean, here we are still moving along with no trade deal with the United States. Krista Freeland has left her post as a cabinet minister and been, given a nice new portfolio that she wanted to be responsible for anyways. And now we're hearing of other cabinet ministers that will be resigning their position. It's almost like the Liberal Party is starting to crumble, Jeff, is it not?
Well, it's difficult to know how to interpret this. I think with Freeland, her strength was in foreign affairs anyway, and she rose to the level of her incompetence as a finance minister. So her strength is in foreign affairs. This is the kind of job she should have anyway, and it gets her out of town before the BC ferry scandal really blows up in the government's face. And people can Google that one, but it is going to. But she won't have to be there to answer any of the questions, and any new minister will not have to answer the questions because they didn't have the portfolio. So the government dodges a bullet there. As for the rest of these cabinet ministers leaving, you wonder if it's okay, we did the party a favor by winning these seats. Now it's time for the payoff. Or if Mark Carney simply is looking to clear the decks of the old Trudeauites and start filling these seats with his own people. And I'm not quite sure how to interpret that one way or the other. But if I'm a constituent, if I voted for a candidate, and a year later that candidate leaves or just buggers off to take a different job, I'm going to feel a little bit swindled by that candidate. Come on, I voted for you, fully expecting you to serve the completion of your term or close to it. And at least declare that you're going to be there to do the job, not to take the money and run, not to take my vote and run. And I don't blame any of these people for taking good jobs. And Bill Blair is one of those guys who is one of the great mysteries of the modern age, how this guy keeps landing on his feet. I mean, this guy, he's unbelievable. He's botched every job he has ever had. Every job he has ever had, Bill Blair has botched. He's one of those guys, if he threw a pearl into the ocean, it'd come back to him in the oyster he ordered for dinner. It's incredible how lucky this guy is. Anyway,
politician.
It's phenomenal. Anyway, that aside, it could be Carney just looking to clear the decks of some of the old deadwood, or it could be these people saying, okay, I've done my bit for the party. I've been a good soldier. Time for my reward now. I'm not sure which of those two realities is the real one.
What I'm hearing from people that I know that work on the Hill is they're telling me they think, anyways, it's just hearsay, of course, that there's a division within the caucus now, that there's problems at the cabinet table. Carney is taking a little bit too much of a conservative approach, that the Green people on the party are very disappointed with him, and they don't want to stick around for the budget. They think he's going to actually get rid of the EV mandate, which would be great for the country. They're fighting with him on that. So it's really just become a battle in the caucus. Have you heard that, Royce, or what are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, there is a lot of conflict right now between people that were very used to doing things the way they were done in Justin Trudeau's government, in which a lot of these, for example, green initiatives were popular, and now they seem to be moving away from that. There's a lot of discomfort. I think there's a kind of there's sort of an explanation here. When Mark Carney became the leader of the Liberal Party, the popularity of the party rocketed up past Pierre Poilievre for the first time in forever. They were popular for a few months. Now their popularity has dropped again. But Carney, when he became prime minister, had to take advantage of that. He had to strike when the iron was hot. And, I think we can argue it's kind of an abuse of the prime ministerial powers. You call an election the instant that you can win. But that's what he had to do. And there really wasn't time to remake the Liberal Party in his image. He had to run with all these old Trudeau war horses, and that's what he did. And now, a few months later, we're seeing the party working through that and then producing these resignations. It's an example of, unfortunately, these people think that Canada is there to serve the Liberal Party rather than the other way around.
Lawrence, what are your thoughts?
Well, several. First of all, Jeff, I want to compliment you on your seafood metaphors. Last time was lobsters, and here we have oysters. So well done.
For a prairie boy.
See where your proclivities lie. And it's been, is this 6 months, I think, since the election, something to that effect, not even a year. And I think constituents should feel duped. Now, it's interesting as well. We talked about this last time with the NDP maybe wanting to call an election early. And usually when the rats leave the ship, usually that's a sign that something else is afoot. I don't know if I agree with Jeff. It's hard to tell. Is it just internal conflict? Are they setting up for actually an election in a minority situation? Have they heard the same things about the NDP wanting to go early? So you have to sort of do the best you can to right the ship. Other people are looking for jobs after they won and got their pensions at our expense. So it's very interesting. As for Christy Freeland, I've got to think she was at the end of her road anyway. I mean, she went from such power to Minister of Transport with the BC Ferry scandal, and or what will be the scandal, we hope. So I would think that for her, it's a good off ramp for her. I don't know if it'll amount to anything other than more pension. I don't think it really means much else. But I would say we should really be watching for the possibility of an election in a shorter time frame than we previously thought, if people are leaving the ship and getting appointments. So it'll be interesting to watch. The rest, all speculation.
So, Royce, how does Carney get out of this? He's got a budget coming up. I think November 4th is the date they're going to release the budget. He's got all these nation-building projects that aren't really nation-building projects as I look at them. They talked about the high-speed train between Montreal and Quebec. It would take 4 years at least before a shovel got in the ground. By then, who knows what's going to become of the economy? The economy is dropping at a much faster pace than I thought it would. But Carney seems to be just ignoring all this and continuing to go on his way, going down to meet with Mexico, not really negotiating with the United States. And it's almost to me like he's waiting until they can renegotiate the entire trade deal.
It might be. The question is, how can he get out of this? I don't think Carney is going to get out of anything. I think the fiscal train is coming towards us, and there's no avoiding that. There's very likely a recession coming, and things are going to get worse. They're going to get far worse before the next election. So some of this stuff, ministers resigning, MPs resigning, by-elections. This is all just kind of shuffling the deck chairs on the Titanic, I think.
Yeah, but I mean, I was in party politics. People are always fighting and going back and forth, or they're in the back rooms trying to get a cabinet spot, or trying to move themselves up in the party. That dysfunction within the party, and I'm glad that Lawrence brought it up. Is that we did talk about it on the last episode. I received information from somebody inside saying that they thought there would be a fall 26 election for the federal party because the NDP sees a light and an opportunity to regain party status right now. And this does lend to that. Don't you think this puts a new pressure on Carney?
Oh yeah, and absolutely. He's got nothing but pressure on him right now, as is. The NDP is really the most interesting party right now. If they can actually challenge the Liberals on kind of that left wing of the political spectrum, Canadian politics is going to get a lot more interesting. And if they are going to defeat the government in a year's time, wow, what a change from the last few years. There was just threats from Jagmeet saying if that party is actually going to hold the Liberals accountable from the left, then the Liberal Party is in some real trouble if they have strong competitors on both the left and the right.
So when do you think Pierre Poilievre will start calling his troops together? There are some seats that were lost where people are not going to run again. So when is he going to start calling for the party to come together? Will that be after the big convention in January, or will it be sooner? Lawrence, you might have some information on that.
Yeah, I don't think anything's going to move till after the convention in Calgary. Is it January or February? I can't recall. What I just want to bring up something that I thought was really interesting. You probably saw the $13 billion modular housing announcement on Sunday by the Prime Minister. So a Conservative member of Parliament did something really smart. She went out to that site, and it looked like there was construction going on. It was completely a Potemkin village. There was nothing there. Everything was taken down. It was a complete Hollywood set. It's a barren, nothing field there. It was entirely a sham. I'm not saying the $13 billion office, another layer of bureaucracy, isn't real. They will no doubt create yet another layer of bureaucracy. But that what that look was of construction was completely a sham. I imagine the Prime Minister will soon announce Confederation and claim credit for that, because that's what he likes to do, go around and claim credit for things that happened before. And I said it last time, the Conservatives have to get ready sooner. They should have done it last time. They need to do it now. We have to get candidates out knocking on doors sooner rather than later. But I think it'll be after that convention in January, February. I think February.
I'd like to get Jeff's thoughts on this because Jeff does a lot of work behind the scenes for the Winnipeg Sun and Facts Matter, digging up and looking at facts and looking at what governments are doing. And you brought up that this whole was a kind of a play. But
Yeah.
I see most political announcements, Jeff, as kind of an act anyways.
I once asked a candidate who was running for the federal leadership of the Conservative Party. I said, why do you think Canadians tend to favor Liberals? And what do you guys need to do differently? And he said, well, Liberals are really good about talking about intentions. And he said, we go immediately to results. So we need to do a better job of talking about our intentions. And I think that's still true to this day about Conservatives, that they tend to go to results. Now, having said that, in our Facts Matter this week, we do take a look at this new housing announcement. And the problem with it is we don't have enough facts. We have a grandiose announcement from the Prime Minister, but we don't know who's going to be doing the building, what the quality of these modular homes is going to be like, who is going to get to live in them, what does deep discount rent, or whatever the phrase is going to be, what does that actually mean? How is this going to help alleviate homelessness? Who is going to manage these properties? How big is the bureaucracy going to be? How long is this project going to go? Will it impact also the money which is also already designated for the city, for example, for the city of Winnipeg for housing? We know that the two payments have come. A third payment is to come, but there may be some performance metrics attached to that third payment. So there's a whole, and even the province and the mayor's office have both said they essentially don't know anything about this. And they don't have any information or any details. So I think we need to be very cautious about, is this another Liberal announcement with good intentions, which may not bear a whole lot of fruit? I think that's certainly one of them. The other thing is the Pierre Poilievre problem that the Conservatives have. That this was the guy who was essentially a one-trick pony. He was the axe the tax guy. What is he now? What does he have to offer Canadians that is going to make them shift their votes from Mark Carney to him? The answer to me is unclear.
It's a great question, and I think it's a fair question. Royce, I saw you nodding your head a few times while Jeff was talking. What do you think of that question? How would you answer that?
Well, I think one thing is that politics is sometimes about survival. It's about surviving. If you can survive, if you could live to fight another day, then that's what matters. And we've seen with the last two Conservative leaders, they lost, they got the boot, and people thought, well, that's the way the party is now. I don't think that's going to happen. I think Pierre is not in any real danger of losing his job in this leadership review. And so being able to survive and fight another day is going to be an opportunity that he has. And as I said, the Liberal government is going to defeat itself. All the things that destroyed Justin Trudeau's popularity are still here. All the economic issues, and they're getting worse. In fact, they're getting far worse. And so I think that the leadership review, the fact that he can survive that, is the most important thing. I still think there's a very high likelihood that Pierre Poilievre becomes the prime minister one day.
I would tend to agree with you, Royce, on that. And I don't think he was a one-issue axe the tax guy. He for some reason, the people behind the campaign focused on particular sloganeering. But he had and still has, I think, a lot more to offer. I agree with Royce that he's really in no danger and shouldn't be, because everything he said, all of his policies are right at the end of the day. And Mr. Carney actually has adopted some of them, at least in his rhetoric, not in what he actually does. But in his rhetoric, he does adopt them. He's hiding, for example, the gas tax, the additional gas tax. He's hiding the industrial carbon tax, which really is still a carbon tax. This holiday of the EV mandate and studying it for the next 6 months. Studying what exactly? Who knows? So I agree with Royce. All the same problems are there. The same characters are there. The same issues are there. But how Pierre runs his campaign is going to be what's critical, and readiness is going to be what's critical. There is room on the left. I see that if the NDP had a good person in charge. I don't see the leadership candidates as being that. I might be wrong about that. If they have someone strong come forward, it's a new ball game.
Yeah, I'd like to think that as we start going, the potentials of another election, I'd like to see politicians spending more time on, and I think it's to what Jeff said, where they're giving you hope or what we intend to do, but we got to start talking more about policy, not one or two things. Like I think there's a real danger in our country right now that we don't see the financial crisis that is coming. I think we're standing at a cliff, and we're just about to be pushed over the cliff when it comes to the economy. I think, yes, we're going to get hit with a recession, and there's a lot of people that don't remember the last recession and how bad that was for our country, and how we're really not paying. That's where we should be paying all of our attention today. I think we should be looking at the risk and our economy and making that number one.
I can't imagine, Kevin, there's that budget, as you mentioned, on November 4th. The deficit and debt are going to be astronomical. Now, having said that, the Prime Minister has decided he's going to separate his budget into structural, what does he call that, investment budget and just the operational budget. And that's a sleight of hand. It's not real. I hope Canadians will pass the IQ test of figuring that one out. But I think it's going to be, I think we're going to get a real cold shower when we see that budget on November 4th. There's nothing, there's no other way it could be. The writing's on the wall.
Can we stop using the term investment every time the government spends some money? This is a Canadian media problem. And this is kind of my old beef as an old media guy. How Canadian media has gotten to the point where all we do is rewrite government news releases.
Yes.
The government is going to invest X amount of dollars in whatever. They're not investing a damn nickel. They're spending money. So
our money.
If we're going to use the word invest, then let's demand of the people who are investing the money what the ROI is. What is the expected return on investment? So otherwise, let's stop being so damn lazy and using the term investment every time the government announces that it's going to spend some of our money.
Agreed.
I agree 100%. I see that all the time and think the same thing. Everything is an investment, but an investment into what? Like what? What are we getting for it? What is the end? Like if I'm going to give you $100, what am I getting for it?
Well, that's right. If your financial planner says we want you to invest your money in whatever the mutual fund or the stock or the GICs, whatever it is, your question is, okay, what's the ROI? What's my return on investment? And we need to start demanding that of our politicians, and we need to start demanding that of lazy Canadian media people who just simply rewrite government news releases. It's the same sort of thing as when they rewrite police news releases. Officers attended to the hell talks like that. Nobody talks like that except police news releases. Police went to the residence. They don't nobody attends to a place. When you're going somewhere, do you say, I attended to the grocery store today? Come on, let's stop rewriting news releases on behalf of these people and speak the way normal people would speak and ask these are just common sense questions to ask.
Well, I think it gets back to the whole politician thing, the political thing, right? It's grandstanding, it's all acting now. We heard about what Carney did. We've seen, I mean, Canoe, is a good statesman, but I mean, it's an act. Like you can see it all the time. It's whenever we're doing something. You had the big giant Canadian flag at the legislature for a long time. But how do we know if the government has stopped buying products from the United States? We don't know that. We don't know that. We hear them, announcing again investments into our highways, but that's what we pay for. But this is what I think, and again, as we said, we were talking about this earlier today in the newsroom. I don't understand what's happened to politics. It's really become a game. It's all about getting likes. It's all about saying something that you think the masses will get behind and support. It's not about managing the company, which is the country. They're not about managing that. They're just about themselves, and they're about their messaging, or what's the word that we used for the law? Virtue signaling, right? That's what it was all about. So investment became a virtue signaling. We're not spending money, we're investing it. This is going to make life better. You want to make life better, get rid of the red tape, lower my taxes, and and make life easier for Canadians to trade and to do business here. That's going to better my life, not whether or not you want to fight in the Supreme Court against something that Quebec is doing. I want to go into U.S. politics for a minute. Not going to talk about Trump. Going to play a clip of a Dearborn City council meeting where the mayor was talking to a resident. Take a quick look at this.
Hezbollah, bombed the embassy in Beirut, and including many Americans. So I just feel that's quite inappropriate.
You are an Islamophobe, and although you live here, I want you to know, as mayor, you are not welcome here. And the day you move out of the city will be the day that I launch a parade celebrating the fact that you moved out of the city, because you are not somebody who believes in coexistence.
Okay, so we don't know the particulars if the mayor and this person know each other, but for a mayor or a politician to say that at a council meeting that he would have a parade for when the guy left town, are we seeing like the very bottom dredges of politics now?
Well, we've seen that, and we saw it here in Canada when the trucker convoy wound up in Ottawa. Whether or not you happen to think that was the right thing to do, and I'm not persuaded that it was, but these were Canadian citizens, and our Prime Minister of the day, Justin Trudeau, rather than acknowledging the grievances of these people, essentially said, you're not really good Canadians. You don't have Canadian values. And he brushed them off, dismissed them. And this is the same sort of thing Nahani Fontaine did in her email exchange with this individual we referenced earlier in the show. And now we're seeing it increasingly, political leaders showing outright contempt for their own constituents.
And Royce, shouldn't there be some sense of decorum? City council, I was on city council. There should be a sense of decorum there. There should be a sense of decorum when we are debating with politicians, but there should be more stricter accountability for politicians that just, as Jeff said, they seem to be bigger than the residents, and they speak like this.
Yeah, I don't know anything about this mayor, but as a general rule, it's the politicians who are the first to lecture other people about things like tolerance and pluralism and diversity. They're the first ones to demonize their opponents when it suits their political needs. The truth is, especially on religious questions, we live in US and Canada are now countries with lots of people with different religious views, and we need politicians that are actually going to be pluralistic about these things, that are going to find things that bring us together. We should be very concerned about politicians that seek to divide us on the basis of genuinely held beliefs, things like religion. It's concerning to people like me.
But do any of you really believe that the people we've elected to office, municipally here in Winnipeg or provincially or across the country or anywhere else, do you really think these are the kind of people that are going to bring people together, that are going to, understand the difference between church and state? Lawrence, I mean, you got into politics and you ran, and I mean, do you really think that the people in office today are giving us the hope that they're going to bring us together? Because I'm not seeing it.
Well, it's an interesting question, but I want to say this. I did run, and I'll share with you why I ran, because never actually harbored any goal or motivation to be a member of the Legislative Assembly. But what happened was, due to some community work I was doing, some pro bono work, some people asked me if I would run for the PC party. My response was, "Are you out of your mind? Who would want that job?" But I said, "I'll find you somebody." So I asked 5 different people if they would run, and they all said no. And 2 of them said, and this is remarkable, I ran, as you know, in tuxedo. 2 of them said that they were afraid to run because of the anti-Semitism they and their families would face if they ran. Mm. And I said to myself, that is not Canada. That is not Manitoba. It's impossible. It's inconceivable to me that you can't run. You're afraid to run if you're Jewish or black or gay or straight or whatever you are. It was just insane to me. So I ran. I don't want to say that all politicians are like that. In looking at this Dearborn thing, and again, as both of you, Royce and Kevin, you said, we don't know what really the history is or how that film was cut or not cut. But for a mayor to say that when the issue was somebody is naming streets after Hezbollah and Hamas supporting people, recognized terrorist entities, that kind of reaction is atrocious. Nahanni Fontaine's reaction is of the same ilk. I don't know that it's on par with that, but it's of the same ilk. It's unacceptable. It's not what we should demand from our politicians. And that's why we said earlier at the start of this that the premier has to stand up for something. He has to say no. I imagine there are politicians, whether in Ottawa or on Broadway, that are of good intention. Who ran for reasons, in some way like I did, maybe Kevin like you did, maybe like other people did. So I don't want to tar everyone with the same brush. But those who react like this mayor and Ms. Fontaine, and now the premier, if he refuses to act, it's unacceptable.
And you're right, not everybody is like this, but I can tell you, when you get into politics, you can see the power trip right away.
When a judge once said to me that it's interesting when you get appointed to be a judge, and it's the same in politics. If you're successful in politics, it brings out the inner core of who you are. If you have a good inner core, that'll get pronounced. It'll get stronger and underlined. If that's not the case, if you have whatever personality issue you might have, that will get pronounced. And I think that's what we're seeing.
Yeah, it's a big issue that you raised, Kevin, a really interesting one. And I think one of the issues is that nowadays, more than was the case in the past, people that get elected are just ultra partisans. They're there for the party. And I don't dislike partisanship. I'm a fan. I always tell my students, I wish you would all go join a party, like become a partisan. It's a great thing to do. But don't become the kind of out to lunch partisans we see on social media sometimes, that are resistant to facts, that are never willing to breathe a word of criticism of their own party. That's not good for politics. And when we get too many of those sorts of people in office, that's when I think we start to run into some problems.
Jeff, you also ran for politics, right? City council.
Well, I ran for city council unsuccessfully, and I wanted to run for city council because there are no party affiliations there, officially anyway. I was asked to run provincially on a couple of occasions, and I declined for 2 reasons. One is that I don't think I'm electable. The second, which is the single biggest reason to say no, I'm unelectable. But the second thing for me is that as soon as you carry a card for a political party, the day is going to come when you are going to have to defend the indefensible. And I just didn't want to put myself in that position.
It's very well said. I mean, party politics is a different animal than city council in some ways. City council is not supposed to have party politics, but it does inadvertently. It has cliques and so on that you're either a part of or you're not.
It's more indirect, right? You're not answerable to the party, but you're connected to one usually.
Yeah. Well, and if you're not connected to that party, then your residents or your area might not get as much as what the others who are connected to that party get. And I think that I got into politics because I thought you could make a change, right? You could get in there, you could start running it like a business. But I see, the more I see now, It really scares me. It bothers me. It worries me for my kids. It worries me for my grandkids because it's not getting in there and dealing with the issue. They're really getting in there and they become a part of this almost a cult, right? I mean, they know everything. They get to decide on everything. Government started telling us what we can buy and what we can't buy. They're telling us what we should like, what we don't like. Governments should not be picking winners and losers when it comes to certain things, but they are. And I think that that's part of our problem today is we've put these politicians on this pedestal and then they've added a whole bunch more layers to the pedestal. So they're much higher. And I think that that's not everybody. And I don't want to be saying that it is everybody, but we are seeing that and we're seeing examples of it. And we've talked about it today on this show.
I don't know that it was ever any different. I'm not sure that Mr. Trudeau Sr. was less modest, or rather more modest than what we see. I don't know that, frankly, Mr. Mulroney, who turned out was an excellent Prime Minister of Canada, really innovative, which I, for one, wasn't supportive initially of him, but turned out to be super, super innovative, great moral core. But I don't think he was modest either. And that's part of the job, is making decisions. And I think as well that really Canadians have to take responsibility. An election is like an IQ test for the country.
Okay,
and
hang on a sec, though. You're saying take a position, but I want them to go in, and I want politicians to make decisions about governing our country, province, or city. I don't want them going in and making decisions like virtue signaling. I don't want them to tell me what I have to believe and what I can 100%. Believe, what I can't believe.
Yep, agreed, totally. But if you're talking about the arrogance of governance, there is an arrogance of governments. It's always been thus. But what you're saying is also right, that yes, they shouldn't be interfering in the private lives of individuals, but that's up to Canadians, and in our case, Manitobans, to pass that IQ test. That vote turns out to be important. It's not a nothing burger. It's an important thing, and we have to exercise it wisely. I'm not sure we did that in March. I'm not sure Canadians passed the IQ test in March. We'll see if we pass it later on.
Any final thoughts, Royce?
Yeah, so apparently I'm the only one here who hasn't run for public office. I feel very left out.
There's still time, Royce. There's time.
I want to get the experience.
You're the smart one.
Count your blessings.
No.
Well, this has been a great discussion. I appreciate your time, gentlemen. I know we'll have more. I'm looking forward to reading your columns in the Winnipeg Sun this weekend. Royce, what's yours on this weekend?
It's on this controversy related to the notwithstanding clause in the federal government.
Great. Looking forward to that. Jeff, what have you got?
It's a little bit esoteric. There was a former Canadian diplomat named Colin Robertson, who's a wonderful man and a brilliant guy, who was in town this week, and I visited with him a little bit. Listened to his presentation, and it was all about the importance of dialogue, which is what we've been having here. And it's the importance of dialogue, especially in an era in which the leader of the free world has discarded the norms and the traditions of diplomacy and dialogue. How do we now deal with that?
Yeah, good one. I look forward to reading that. Lawrence, what have you got up for us this weekend?
I'll tell you after I write it. And now that Jeff is attacking President Trump, I might go a different direction. We'll have to see.
Thank you for your time, guys. And remember, at home, thank you for watching. Please share the video. And what is it? Hit that subscribe button.
Smash. Gotta smash
the subscribe button.
The like button too.
Oh, the like button too. Yeah, we need to smash those buttons as hard as we can. Have yourselves a great weekend and look forward to reading your columns. And thank you for your time.
Thanks for watching Inside Politics with Kevin Klein. Please like and subscribe to this channel and visit thewinnipegsun.com for more.